the participants on this webinar. I'll be briefly talking about the GOI's flagship initiative, the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project. Many of you may be aware of this particular project. It has been in the offering for almost a decade now. And my presentation is basically going to touch upon a few points. So I'll just give you an indication about the development objective of the project, what are the key components, and what are the key achievements till date on this particular project. Before going ahead, I would just like to inform a few things here. Now, this particular project, as I mentioned, it is the Government of India's flagship program on mitigation. Essentially, the project is managed through a kind of a mechanism at the national level as well as at the state level. At the national level, we have a project management unit, which is actually constituted in the National Disaster Management Authority. There is a full-fledged team which basically looks after the implementation of this project. Similarly, to ensure that the key targets are achieved, the NDMA mechanism through the project management unit also has a steering committee, and the steering committee brings in several line ministries onto the discussion table, because it requires a lot of integration and collaboration both at the national as well as the state level. At the state level, similarly, the implementation mechanism is through a state project implementation unit. Most of the states, they have the State Disaster Management Authority, and the State Disaster Management Authority basically leads this program at the state level. Within the setup of the state, they also have a steering committee which basically oversees and guides the process of implementation. Having said that, I'll just give you a quick brief on the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project 1. As I mentioned, there are two phases. This one is phase 1. The development objective of this particular project is to reduce the vulnerability of the coastal communities in the state of Andhra Pradesh and Odisha. These were the two states which showed readiness, and they were in the front line in terms of having met to certain criteria in terms of taking the project forward. This project actually began way back in March 30th, 2011, and the revised closing date of the project was 2018. And over the period of 8 years, a large number of initiatives were taken up in both the states of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. The total outlay of this project, to just give you a sense in terms of the financial resources that went into putting up these activities, it amounts to close to about 455 million. That is roughly approximately 3,000 crores of investment was done on the mitigation side of the story. The key components, when the project was designed, it included 4 major components, as you see on the slide. It included a particular section on early warning dissemination system, and I want to emphasize that this is not a warning system generation thing. It is on the dissemination side of the story in terms of how the information, as mentioned earlier during the presentation by Dr. Mahapatra, and we also heard Madam from IMD, Sunita Devi, who basically gave us an interesting insight in terms of the science that goes behind it. And once that kind of information is put in kind of a mechanism which are to be relayed, the dissemination system finally takes it over in terms of reaching to the communities at risk. It's also important that the dissemination also has a sort of a capacity building component, and that's something which was undertaken under the project. The cyclone risk mitigation project also has a component on the risk mitigation infrastructure side of the piece. I'll describe what all investments went around it. The third component is basically on looking at the technical assistance, which goes for both the state and the national level capacity building activities. And the last one is to ensure that all the project management and the implementation support which is required to execute both at the national level, the state level, as well as the implementing agencies who are responsible for execution of the activities, they are supported through the project. Looking at the components, this is quite a very dense slide, but I thought it's important to summarize some of the activities that the project did under the phase 1, which was in the state of Andhra Pradesh as well as in the state of Odisha. The key outputs which came up when the project closed way back in 2018, and there was an independent evaluation group which actually went around doing an assessment of the effectiveness of the investments on the early warning system. The reports, finally, when it got concluded in terms of the project, it actually established the last mile connectivity in 1,055 villages, both in Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, which covers close to about 4.2 million people. A large number of BSNL subscribers, particularly in Odisha, were brought into the system to receive warnings, and there is an effort for the state to also rope in a couple of other key subscribers or other service providers to be part of that larger effort, and that process is an ongoing, and it's actually managed by OSDMA. There are a large number of activities in the early warning system. I mean, it includes integration between the state operations center to the district, and from the district it goes to the block, and finally it goes down to the last site. And what you see here on this particular building top is basically the warning alert siren system, which basically can communicate both voice and tones, and the information can be relayed from the SCOC directly to the field sites. So this has been covering the entire coastline of Andhra and Odisha as part of the project. Now, looking at the outcomes, this system was effective for several cyclones that happened in the last 1.5 years. What you see here was basically for cyclone-prone, where the information from IMD, when it reaches to the state, the state actually through this system, disseminates it to the communities at risk. Kind of a baseline survey was also undertaken to understand the effectiveness, to look in terms of how the warning system has reached, and I'm very happy to inform that there is a sort of 100% coverage that is now being found through this survey in terms of the effectiveness of the outreach of this particular warning to the communities at risk. Now, looking at the risk mitigation infrastructure part of it, there are various risk mitigation infrastructure activities that were taken up under the project. Now, just to summarize, this is a very complicated process of going around finding an investment. You have a limited amount of resource to be actually put onto the ground, and then you need to be also very sure in terms of where are you going to really locate this particular investments. Now, the infrastructure solutions are based on a wide range of issues. One is to understand in terms of the specific need of the communities which are at risk. The investments are also informed by the existing set of hazard mapping work, and this would have been done by the state government. There are a large number of technical institutions in the country who also undertake a large number of risk mapping and vulnerability mapping exercises, including the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Zone Management, which has a large number of activities done on the hazard mapping as well as on the vulnerability side of the story. You also have INCOIS, which has been doing a lot of work on the tsunami inundation and the coastal vulnerability mapping exercises. So this is the database which is being used to locate in terms of whatever best available of hazard information is there, and that is something which is taken into the project. The event of the past, I mean, this is something where you go to a large number of villages, so you will get up some kind of a storyline to understand in terms of when was the last event and what is the height. And these are information which are very important and critical to look in terms of where are you really citing this investment, and looking at the location part of it. The exposure information is very much critical. The bank also has an environmental and social screening checklist, and there is a safeguard requirement which all the projects have to cater to. There's a technical feasibility work which is also being undertaken to see whether putting an investment in a particular location is technically feasible or not. The cost benefit analysis is also being undertaken to see whether you want to put one infrastructure here, or you want to put multiple infrastructure, or you want to combine multiple infrastructure and just put one big infrastructure. So these are the cost benefit analysis which has to be taken to look in terms of your resources. Though being limited, it also actually maximizes in terms of the outreach. And the last one is on the investment readiness. There are certain readiness criteria which are required in terms of going ahead and putting these investments in place. So what I would like to summarize here is that under the cyclone risk mitigation project, under the phase one, both in case of Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, we're able to put about 219 multipurpose cyclone shelters in AP and 316 multipurpose cyclone shelters in Odisha. And as Mr. GVV Sharma from NDMA did mention, Member Secretary said that it's not about just building these things, but how do we ensure that these things are also taken care of. Most of these structures which have been built under the project are seen as a multi-purpose cyclone shelter. They are either used as schools, they are used as public health centers. In the normal time, some of them are also used by SHGs, some of them are handed to the communities to manage it as marriage centers, etc. But given the fact that this is a very important initiative, one has to also ensure that the continuity of the shelters are maintained at all times. And this is not just for the cyclones alone. I mean, there are various kind of emergencies that keep happening in the state despite the seasons. These shelters are made available even in the case of COVID. I mean, you would see a large number of the shelters being converted into temporary, setups for quarantine and other kind of requirements. The Cyclone Shelter Management and Maintenance Committee is a kind of a mechanism which is put under the project. The state government also put in resources to ensure that the states have a corpus fund to manage and maintain these assets. In addition to the cyclone shelters, a large number of evacuation roads and bridges have been constructed under the project just to ensure that safe evacuation is done, and people can actually move out from the harm's way. Embankments have been put up in both the AP and Andhra Pradesh. The Embankment Surveillance Committee, like the Cyclone Shelter Management Committee, there is a surveillance committee which is being done with the help of the local people. And this is established to ensure that there is community ownership and identification of repairs, etc., passed on to the Water Resource Department. Just to quickly summarize in terms of the outcomes, both on these investments in the state of AP, what you typically see is that the access to shelters are phenomenally increased. Both in that has also been seen in the case of Odisha, when the survey was conducted way back in 2010, and when we did this in 2018, you see a sort of a huge jump in terms of access to the shelters. In terms of the baseline studies which are done on the improvement of the embankments, and there is a significant amount of understanding now that the loss of agricultural land has come down significantly by putting up these certain embankments, and there are certain figures which gives you in terms of what those outputs are, what the outcomes are typically like. As I mentioned earlier, the project also looks in terms of the technical assistance, and here you have a sort of exercise which was done in depth, preparing the India Cyclone Hazard Risk Atlas. It went into in-depth analysis for Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, but it also covered a large number of other states in the country, and it actually builds on the whole information on cyclone history, exposure, population at risk, and this formed the kind of a basis to understand in terms of what if a kind of a scenario, if you have a big event happening around, one can actually go into this particular dashboard, pick up information, and based on that information, one can give a sort of a broad sense in terms of what is the likely potential impact. Now, this was not dynamic. Under the phase one, this was built up with a large number of institutional support, which included all technical agencies, which includes the IMD, which includes the Survey of India, and it required a lot of information of the coastline, and this was actually built up. In phase two, this was taken forward, and as Dr. Devi mentioned, in terms of presentation, in terms of what it looks like. But this has been a sort of a process which began way back in 2012, 2013, and we are utilizing that to have experimental forecast under the cyclone risk mitigation project. In addition to that, as you see on the slide, there are a large number of additional activities. One activity which I would definitely like to mention here is the work which was done by NIDM, and there were two major studies which were done under the cyclone risk mitigation project. The first study was preparing the long-term training and capacity building strategy for DRR in India. One of the fantastic pieces of work, I mean, at least I know of, in the recent past, which brought out a whole set of information on the core capacities that are required. It also brought out a large number of TOT modules. What you see on this slide is a kind of output that was actually produced both under study one and the study two. The study two was primarily focusing on coming up with the post-damage needs assessment. I think this was something which was released last year by NIDM, in a forum where these tools are now available for implementation, and states can actually utilize this. Just one thing which I forgot to mention was on this particular atlas, the atlas is available to all the state governments. The updated information on this thing was slightly for a period 2016. State governments have been trained extensively to look in terms of building up the database, because there would be a whole lot of data sets that keeps generating in the state in terms of investments. All those things can actually go into this particular atlas, and the states can actually utilize it. Now, coming to the cyclone risk mitigation phase two, I'll just take another 3 minutes and I'll sum up my talk on this project. The phase two is similar to the phase one. The learnings from phase one has been incorporated to a significant extent when the phase two project was initiated. And this particular project essentially covers the state of West Bengal, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, and Kerala. You may wonder why Tamil Nadu and Puducherry are not there. The reason being that both Tamil Nadu and Puducherry are part of another program which is called the Coastal Disaster Risk Reduction Project, and some of the activities what you see here are also being taken up in that project. So that is one of the reasons why you don't see Tamil Nadu and Puducherry as part of the engagement under this particular project. The components are similar. You have early warning dissemination system, the risk mitigation infrastructure, the hazard risk management work, the project implementation support. The project was effective in 2015, and in 2021 we plan to close the project with successive investments in the states. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is just a summary slide to just give an information in terms of the work under progress. This is in the state of Goa, where you see the dissemination systems. All those small little locations are basically the installations that will go in for the early warning system. There is a trial pit which is being looked at in terms of the technical investigation that has to go before the construction of the work. And what you see on the right hand side is basically a kind of a flow chart which looks in terms of how the information will actually disseminate. The project looks at similar investments, except that under this project, we are also focusing on the underground electrical cabling works. So in the case of investments, this is what the overall outlay looks like. In West Bengal, we have about 146 cyclone shelters. And I would like to mention here that these cyclone shelters, the one that you see in the picture, that was actually taken during the cyclone Amphan. The structure has certain characteristics as part of the technical design brief. It has got power backup. It has got enough mechanism to also bring in animals. It has got required ramps, and a whole lot of other features are there in this building. We improvised this design going to certain spaces like in Gujarat. When you get into zone 4 and zone 5 of the earthquake zones, I mean, those buildings are designed with the shear walls and those kind of design elements, so that it ensures that in case there is kind of an event like an earthquake, these structures also perform those kind of those kind of ground shaking. Summarizing it in terms of the investments on the West Bengal side, as I mentioned, 146 cyclone shelters. They're all built and constructed. They were also used part of them were used during the cyclone Amphan. The underground electrical cabling works in Digha, which is for about 515 kilometers. Part of this was also operational, was commissioned when the cyclone Amphan came, and we also learned from the state that there was no disruption of power to a certain part of that town of Digha. Gujarat, 95 cyclone shelters, stretches of kilometers of roads and underground electrical cabling work for 30 kilometers. Maharashtra, we have cyclone shelters, underground cabling works and saline embankments. Goa, we have cyclone shelters and underground electrical cabling work. Karnataka, we have taken up roads connecting to settlements, which will require to move out in case there is an evacuation, cyclone shelters, bridges, saline embankments, and for Kerala, we have cyclone shelters. And the rest of the processes are the same. We have a cyclone shelter management committee, etc., to basically take care of the assets. We are also working with the large number of village disaster management teams to ensure that these things are the people around those villages who are at risk are all trained, and they know exactly in terms of how to react in case of an event. Just to give you a sense in terms of one of the key activities that we're doing on the technical assistance side, as I mentioned earlier, in the previous phase, we prepared a sort of a static, exercise of doing the risk modeling. But at this stage, in close collaboration with the IMD, with INCOIS, and a host lot of other institutions, we are running the dynamic composite. The project is running the dynamic composite risk atlas, which actually takes into the effect of the wind, the rains, the kind of storm surge phenomena on the fly. And this has been done for last 3 events and the 2 events which happened this year. And it's still in an experimental phase, and we are expecting this to be commissioned as a sort of a kind of output under the project, which will be finally taken over by the Indian Meteorological Department. That is the C1. The C2, C3 these are some of the activities which we're doing in close collaboration with the states and NDMA. The C4 is the preparation of a resilience action plan for 6 secondary towns and cities under the project in all the 6 states. And the last component, what you see here, is the subcomponent is the design of the National Seismic Risk Mitigation Program, which is also underway, and it is it's a significant amount of progress under this particular subcomponent. So for more information on this particular project, one can actually log into the ncrmp.gov.in. This is a portal which is managed and operated by NDMA. Almost all the documents on the project are available here. All the mission reports are also available here, and you can take a look at this. Thank you so much for your patience.